When Universal Studios Florida opened in 1990, it promised guests the chance to ride the movies. Across the park, huge practical sets, live performers, special effects shows, and ambitious ride systems brought some of Universal's biggest films to life. But over time, the park changed. Original attractions disappeared, older franchises faded, and new lands took their place. This is the story of 10 vanished Universal Studios Florida attractions, and what replaced them. When Universal opened its Florida park in 1990, several of its headline attractions were inspired by moments from the Universal Studios Hollywood Studio Tour. Instead of recreating the tram tour itself, Universal took some of its most popular scenes and turned them into full attractions. Jaws became a boat ride, Earthquake expanded the original segment into a special effects demonstration, and King Kong, who had terrorised the Hollywood tram tour since 1986, was given a giant standalone attraction of his own. Kongfrontation opened with the park on June 7, 1990, and was based on the 1976 version of King Kong. Guests entered through a recreation of New York's old Pennsylvania station, before moving into a grimy, graffiti-covered subway station, where urgent news reports made it feel as though the city was already in the middle of a crisis. Television monitors played breaking news reports from WWOR-TV, warning that Kong had escaped and was rampaging through New York City. At the end of the queue, riders boarded a suspended tram, designed to resemble the real Roosevelt Island tramway. A live guide explained that the tram was being used to move civilians out of Manhattan, but almost immediately, it became clear the route was taking guests directly into Kong's path. The tram moved out above a devastated New York street scene. Below were crushed cars, broken hydrants, derailed trains, steam pipes, fire, sparks, and the wreckage of Kong's attack. Police radio chatter followed the tram's progress, while a helicopter tracked the giant ape through the city. Then, ahead of the vehicle, Kong's shadow appeared against a building. A power pole collapsed, an electrical transformer exploded, and guests knew that King Kong was not far away. The first encounter with the giant ape came as the tram approached the Queensboro Bridge. Kong was there hanging from the bridge itself, as helicopters opened fire. The figure was around 39 feet tall, with a 54-foot arm span, and was far larger than the Kong figure used in Hollywood. As the tram passed, Kong attacked, causing the vehicle to shake and drop, while a helicopter crashed and exploded nearby. As the tram neared Roosevelt Island, another helicopter spotlight blinded the riders. The guide urged the pilot to turn the light off, and when it disappeared, Kong was revealed, directly beside the tram. He grabbed the vehicle, lifted it, roared into riders' faces, and blasted them with his banana breath. The tram dropped before finally escaping into the station, where monitors showed riders on board as part of a breaking news report. For early Universal, this was exactly the kind of attraction that made the park different. It was large-scale, cinematic, and chaotic. The huge sets, live narration, practical effects, and 2 massive animatronic Kong figures combined to create an experience unlike anything else in Orlando at the time, making it a must-do attraction for many visitors. It also became one of the park's most popular attractions. However, that ambition came at a cost. Kongfrontation was complex, expensive to operate, and prone to technical issues. Over time, some of the movement and effects were reportedly reduced to improve reliability. By the early 2000s, Universal Studios Florida was beginning to move away from its original studio tour-inspired attractions. Kongfrontation closed on September 8, 2002, and its huge show building was transformed into Revenge of the Mummy, which opened in 2004. For many fans, it was a painful loss, because Kongfrontation had been one of the park's opening day attractions and a showcase of the large-scale practical effects that defined early Universal. Its closure marked the end of another piece of the park's original identity, though Mummy would go on to become one of Universal's most popular and highly regarded attractions in its own right. Kong did eventually return to Orlando, but not inside Universal Studios Florida. In 2016, Skull Island, Reign of Kong, opened at Islands of Adventure, bringing the character back with a new mixture of sets, screens, and a large animatronic figure. But for many long-time visitors, it never lived up to the original. While Reign of Kong was impressive in its own right, its heavy reliance on screens and projection-based scenes felt much less immersive than Kongfrontation's vast physical sets. For those who experienced the original, nothing quite matched the scale of hanging above a ruined New York street, trapped in a tram, while coming face to face with King Kong himself. The Funtastic World of Hanna-Barbera opened with Universal Studios Florida on June 7, 1990, and represented a very different side of the park's original identity. While attractions like Kongfrontation, Jaws, and Earthquake leaned into disaster, danger, and practical effects, Hanna-Barbera was Universal's early family simulator. It was colourful, fast-paced, and built around a huge collection of cartoon characters that had been part of television history for decades. At the time, Hanna-Barbera was still a major name in animation, and characters such as Yogi Bear, Scooby-Doo, the Flintstones, and the Jetsons instantly recognisable to multiple generations. The attraction also arrived at an important time for Universal. Back to the Future the ride was originally intended to be the park's headline simulator attraction, but development delays pushed the opening back to 1991. That left Funtastic World of Hanna-Barbera as Universal's first motion simulator, and one of the major family attractions available when the park opened. Located near the front of Universal Studios Florida, in Production Central, it was among the first rides many guests encountered upon entering the park. Guests waiting outside the attraction would see monitors playing classic Hanna-Barbera cartoons. The pre-show then introduced William Hanna and Joseph Barbera themselves, appearing in live action to explain how cartoons were created. This fit perfectly with Universal's original studio theme, where attractions often focused on the production process behind film and television. During the demonstration, Joseph Barbera drew Elroy Jetson, who came to life and jumped off the page. Dick Dastardly and Muttley appeared, furious that they were not the stars of Hanna-Barbera's next big project. Dastardly kidnapped Elroy and pulled him into the computer, leaving Yogi Bear and Boo Boo to lead the rescue mission. Guests then moved into the main theatre, where they boarded a motion simulator rocket, with Yogi as their captain. The rocket was launched like a slingshot, using a rubber band, sending riders into a chase through some of Hanna-Barbera's most famous animated worlds. First came Bedrock, where the vehicle flew into the prehistoric world of the Flintstones. Riders passed through Mr. Slate's construction site, dodged traffic, and found themselves chasing Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble through the streets. From there, the rocket flew through a vortex and into the darker world of Scooby-Doo. Racing through a cemetery and haunted castle, riders nearly collided with the Mystery Machine, encountered ghosts, and saw Scooby and Shaggy caught up in the chaos. The chase then moved into the future, arriving in Orbit City from the Jetsons. Flying cars filled the screen as Elroy's family joined the pursuit. The finale took place around a futuristic amusement park, where the rocket followed Dastardly onto a roller coaster track, before Rosie the robot helped capture him and Muttley. Elroy was saved, the villains were arrested, and guests crashed back to the station, where Yogi thanked them for joining the ride. For 1990, the Funtastic World of Hanna-Barbera was technically notable. Not only was it Universal Orlando's first motion simulator, the ride film made extensive use of computer-generated imagery, combined with traditionally animated characters. Unlike Disney's Star Tours, which placed guests inside a fully enclosed cabin, Hanna-Barbera seated riders in rows facing a giant screen, a format Universal would continue using in several future simulator attractions. After the ride, guests entered an interactive post-show area, featuring animation-themed activities and character experiences, before exiting through a Hanna-Barbera gift shop. The Funtastic World of Hanna-Barbera avoided the reliability problems that plagued some original rides. It remained a popular family attraction through the 1990s, and became a dependable part of the park's lineup. By the early 2000s, however, Universal was increasingly focused on newer franchises that resonated more strongly with contemporary audiences. While the simulator itself still worked, many of Hanna-Barbera's classic characters were no longer as popular with children as they had been over a decade earlier. The attraction closed on October 20th, 2002, the same year as Kongfrontation. The simulator theatre would go on to host Jimmy Neutron's Nicktoon Blast, and later Despicable Me Minion Mayhem, and the basic attraction system has remained in use since opening day. Even after leaving Universal, the attraction lived on through installations at parks across North America, where the film continued to entertain guests under a variety of names. For a ride based on cartoons that were already decades old when Universal opened, the Funtastic world of Hanna-Barbera ultimately enjoyed a remarkably long life, both inside and outside the resort. Nickelodeon Studios was not a traditional ride, but it was one of the clearest examples of what Universal Studios Florida was originally built to be. When the park opened in June 1990, Universal was selling guests on the idea of a real working production studio. This was not just a place to ride movie-based attractions, it was meant to be Florida's version of Hollywood, where visitors could step behind the scenes and see films and TV shows being made. The Nickelodeon project had come together before the park opened, when Nickelodeon agreed to build its first major production facility inside Universal Studios Florida. At the time, the network was growing quickly, but its live-action shows were being filmed at different locations across North America. Universal offered Nickelodeon a permanent home in Orlando, while also gaining a major draw for younger guests. The studio would occupy Buildings 17 and Soundstages 18 and 19 in the production central area of the park. Nickelodeon Studios opened as the first world headquarters for kids. The exterior had the bright colours and playful design language associated with the network, while the courtyard featured photo opportunities and eventually the famous slime geyser, which erupted with green water in front of the studio. The public experience was built around a 45-minute studio tour. Guests entered near Soundstage 18, before moving through the building and up into viewing areas, where they could look down onto active production spaces. Depending on the day, visitors might glimpse rehearsals, game show tapings, or other studio activity. The tour also passed through areas such as the wardrobe department and GAC kitchen. One of the key challenges was that Universal's guests expected to see something happening every day. Television production did not always work that neatly. Some shows taped only on certain days, and others rehearsed for long periods before filming. To solve this, Nickelodeon created Game Lab, a mock game show at the end of the tour that gave guests a more memorable interactive finale. It also featured one of the most memorable traditions from children's television, the possibility that someone might get slimed. Throughout the 1990s, Nickelodeon Studios became closely associated with shows such as Double Dare, Legends of the Hidden Temple, Clarissa Explains It All, and Keenan and Kel. The studio produced more than 2,000 episodes of original programming, and at its peak, employed hundreds of people. But as the decade progressed, the original concept of Universal Studios Florida began to change. The park shifted away from behind-the-scenes production and increasingly focused on self-contained rides and major intellectual properties. Nickelodeon was changing too. More production moved to California, where there was a larger talent pool, more established infrastructure, and better access to the wider entertainment industry. By the turn of the millennium, fewer shows were being produced there. The tour felt less active, and the idea of watching television being made inside a theme park no longer had the same pull. Nickelodeon Studios closed permanently on April 30th, 2005, after nearly 15 years of operation. The site was later redeveloped, with Soundstage 18 becoming home to the Blue Man Group show in 2007. The long-running performance brought a very different kind of entertainment to the building, combining music, comedy, and multimedia effects, and remained a fixture of Universal Orlando until 2021. However, for years after its closure, parts of the old studio reportedly remained surprisingly intact, with remnants of the bright 1990s Nickelodeon theming still hidden behind closed doors. Back to the Future the ride was one of Universal Studios Florida's most important early additions. The idea for a Back to the Future attraction dated back to the mid-1980s, when Steven Spielberg saw the potential of Universal's growing theme park ambitions. After the success of Star Tours at Disneyland, Spielberg challenged Universal's creative team to develop a ride based on Back to the Future that could match or even surpass Disney's simulator. Early ideas reportedly included a roller coaster, but the concept was eventually morphed into a large-scale motion simulator. Back to the Future the ride was originally planned as part of Universal Studios Florida's opening lineup in 1990, but development delays meant it was not ready in time. Instead, the Florida version opened on May 2, 1991, in the Expo Center area, later renamed World Expo. By then, Universal Studios Florida had endured a difficult opening year, with several major attractions suffering from technical problems. Back to the Future arrived at exactly the right moment, giving the park a major new headliner based on one of Universal's most popular film franchises. The attraction was set inside the Institute of Future Technology, a futuristic research facility founded by Dr. Emmett Brown after the events of Back to the Future Part 3. Outside and throughout the queue, guests saw props and references to the film series, including the DeLorean time machine and the train from the third film. Queue videos combined clips from the trilogy with new material featuring Doc Brown, who introduced guests to the Institute and explained that they had been chosen as volunteers for a time travel experiment. The pre-show set up the premise for the main ride experience. Doc planned to send guests one day into the future, using a new 8-passenger DeLorean time machine. But Biff Tannen had broken into the Institute. After sneaking through the facility, Biff trapped Doc in his office, stole another DeLorean, and escaped into the space-time continuum. Doc then asked the guests to help stop him. The plan was simple: follow Biff through time, accelerate to 88 miles per hour, and bump his vehicle hard enough to send both DeLoreans back to the present. Guests were then loaded into their own DeLorean time machine. The ride vehicle was themed as an 8-passenger convertible version of the famous car, with Doc appearing on a dashboard monitor to guide the mission. Once the gull-wing doors had closed, the vehicle lifted into position, and smoke filled the room. The ride began in Hill Valley in 2015, where guests chased Biff through the futuristic city, filled with neon signs, flying cars, and the familiar clock tower. Biff then escaped into the Ice Age, sending riders into frozen caverns, where an avalanche damaged the vehicle. After a near fall into a chasm, Doc restarted the engine, and the chase continued into the Cretaceous period. There, the DeLorean flew through a prehistoric landscape, encountered a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and plunged towards an active volcano. As Biff's damaged time machine headed towards a lava flow, guests finally caught up to him, bumped his DeLorean, and sent both vehicles back through time. The ride ended back at the Institute of Future Technology, where Biff was taken away by security, and Doc thanked the riders, reminding them that the future was whatever they made it. As guests exited, Huey Lewis in the News' Back in Time played, tying the experience back to the films. Back to the Future was a major technical achievement. The attraction used 2 Omnimax Dome theatres, each with 12 DeLorean vehicles, arranged on multiple levels. Each vehicle held 8 riders and moved on a motion base that could tilt, rise, and drop in sync with the film. The giant dome screen surrounded riders' field of vision, making it feel as though each car was flying independently, even though other DeLoreans were positioned nearby. The 2-theatre arrangement also helped reliability, where one side could continue operating even if the other had issues. The ride film itself was created using large-scale miniatures, motion control photography, and practical effects, with Douglas Turnbull directing the main ride film. Christopher Lloyd returned as Doc Brown, and Thomas F. Wilson reprised his role as Biff. Although Michael J. Fox did not appear in new footage, Marty was still represented through clips from the films. For years, the attraction stood as one of Universal's signature experiences, and became a fan favourite, but by the 2000s, Universal was progressively retiring many of its older attractions. Back to the Future closed on March 30th, 2007. The ride system and building were reworked into the Simpsons ride, which kept the simulator format but replaced the Institute of Future Technology with Krusty Land. The Simpsons ride even included a nod to its predecessor, with an animated Doc Brown appearing in the queue. For many fans, Back to the Future the ride remains one of Universal's defining lost attractions. It captured the energy of the films, used a ride system that felt ambitious for its time, and gave guests the closest thing to a fourth Back to the Future film. Jaws was one of Universal Studios Florida's original opening day attractions, and like Kongfrontation and Earthquake, it began as an expanded version of a scene from the Universal Studios Hollywood Studio Tour. At Hollywood, Jaws had been part of the tram tour since 1976, taking guests past a small recreation of Amity Island before the shark suddenly lunged from the water. For Florida, Universal wanted something much larger. Jaws would become a full boat ride through Amity Harbor, with guests placed directly into the story as the shark attacked around them. The ride opened with Universal Studios Florida, but its early iterations suffered frequent breakdowns. The original version was far more ambitious than the Hollywood tram scene, featuring underwater shark animatronics, tour boats, fire effects, and a moment where the shark would actually bite the boat and turn it. In theory, it would have been one of the park's most spectacular attractions. However, the effects were unreliable, with the shark figures having constant mechanical issues, leading to the ride struggling to operate consistently. Universal closed Jaws just months after opening, and eventually reworked portions of the attraction almost completely. The redesigned version opened in 1993, keeping the basic idea of an Amity Island boat tour, but replacing several problem scenes with more reliable effects. This was the version that most guests came to know. The attraction began in Amity, a charming seaside town presented as the real location behind the events that inspired Spielberg's film. Guests entered Captain Jake's Amity boat tours, where the queue passed through boathouse-style buildings filled with fishing gear and local details. Once on board, guests were taken out onto the water by a live skipper. The tour started calmly as the boat passed familiar Amity landmarks, including Chief Brody's house. But the mood changed when a distress call came over the radio from another tour boat. As the boat rounded the lighthouse, guests discovered the wreckage of Amity 3 sinking into the water. A dorsal fin appeared nearby, disappeared beneath the surface, and then moved toward the boat. The skipper grabbed the boat's grenade launcher and fired at the shark, missing as it vanished again. With the situation getting worse, the boat headed into a nearby boathouse for cover, but guests were far from safe. The walls shook, and the shark burst through the side of the building. The boat escaped back into open water, only for the danger to continue. When Chief Brody radioed that he would arrive in 10 minutes, the skipper delivered one of the ride's most remembered lines. 10 minutes? We'll be shark bait in 10 minutes. Moments later, the shark attacked again, near a gas dock. The skipper fired another shot, missed the shark, and accidentally hit the dock, triggering a huge fireball that engulfed the surrounding area. Guests could feel the heat from the flames as the boat narrowly escaped. For the finale, the skipper attempted to evacuate guests onto a nearby fishing pier. The shark returned one last time, but bit down on an underwater cable and was electrocuted. Steam filled the air, and the injured shark resurfaced before making a final lunge at the boat. The skipper fired one last shot, finally killing the shark and bringing the guests safely back to Amity. After its troubled beginning, the redesigned Jaws became one of Universal's most beloved attractions. But change was coming, as Universal Orlando was seeing success with newer franchises. The Wizarding World of Harry Potter had opened at Islands of Adventure in 2010 and became a huge success, transforming Universal's fortunes and proving how powerful a fully immersive Harry Potter land could be. Jaws and the surrounding Amity area occupied a large piece of land inside Universal Studios Florida, making it the ideal location for the next major expansion. Jaws closed permanently on January 2nd, 2012, along with the rest of Amity. The area was demolished and replaced by the Wizarding World of Harry Potter Diagon Alley, which opened in 2014, with Harry Potter and the Escape from Gringotts as its centrepiece. A few tributes still remain, including the Hanging Shark photo opportunity, now found in the San Francisco area of the park. Although Jaws is gone from Florida, the attraction did not disappear completely. A version of the standalone boat ride still operates at Universal Studios Japan, while the original Jaws scene remains part of the studio tour in Hollywood. Earthquake the Big One was another of Universal Studios Florida's original attractions that took its inspiration from the Universal Studios Hollywood Studio Tour. In Hollywood, Earthquake had opened as a tram tour scene set inside a San Francisco subway station. The tram would roll into the station, only for an 8.3 magnitude earthquake to tear the set apart around it. Roads cracked, a gas truck crashed through the ceiling, fire erupted, another train derailed, and water flooded down the stairs. It was a short sequence, but an impressive one, and it fit perfectly with Universal's original idea of showing guests how movie effects were created. For Universal Studios Florida, the concept was expanded into a standalone attraction. Earthquake the Big One opened with the park, and was based on the 1974 disaster film Earthquake. Unlike Kongfrontation or Jaws, the attraction was not presented purely as a ride. It was also a special effects demonstration, taking guests through several pre-show areas before placing them inside the final earthquake sequence. The attraction was located in the San Francisco area of the park, and guests entered what appeared to be a transit authority building, where the early sections of the experience explained how large-scale disaster scenes were created for the movies. The pre-show included footage hosted by Charlton Heston, star of the original film, who discussed the techniques used to create the illusion of destruction. The attraction then moved into more practical demonstrations. Guests saw how miniatures, matte paintings, and chroma key effects, combined with camera tricks, could be used to make disaster scenes appear much larger and more dangerous than they really were. The final section was the main event. Guests boarded a subway train for what was framed as a filming of a major earthquake scene. The train moved into the Embarcadero station, where everything initially seemed calm. Then the lights began to flicker, the train started to shake, cracks appeared in the platform, sparks flew from electrical equipment, and pieces of the station began to collapse. Suddenly, a gas tanker crashed down from the street above and burst into flames. Another subway train entered the station and derailed, hurtling toward the guests. Then a water main broke, sending a flood rushing down the stairs and into the station. The entire set seemed to fall apart around the train, before the director called cut. Earthquake the Big One suffered from some technical issues during Universal Studios Florida's difficult opening period. But unlike Jaws, it was rectified and remained a fixture of the park for years. By the early 2000s, however, the 1974 film was no longer a strong reference point for many visitors. In 2002, Universal updated parts of the pre-show, and the attraction referenced other films as well. The earthquake finale remained the heart of the experience, but the original connection to the film was mostly lost. Earthquake the Big One closed permanently on November 5, 2007, and was transformed into Disaster, a major motion picture ride starring you, which opened in January 2008. Disaster kept the subway earthquake finale, but reframed the experience around a fictional movie studio. Guests became extras in a disaster movie, with footage of them edited into a fake trailer at the end of the ride. Disaster lasted until September 2015, when it closed to make way for Fast and Furious Supercharged. The replacement has since closed as well, but the original earthquake concept has not disappeared entirely. A version of the subway disaster scene still operates as part of the studio tour in Hollywood, a lasting example of the kind of practical effects showcase that was part of early Universal Studios Florida. Although its name suggested otherwise, Twister Ride It Out was not a conventional ride. It was a large-scale special effects show. The attraction replaced Ghostbusters Spooktacular, one of the park's original stage shows. Ghostbusters had opened with Universal Studios Florida in 1990, but by the middle of the decade, the park was looking for something newer. Twister had been released in 1996 and become one of the biggest films of that year, making it an obvious choice for Universal. The film was a disaster thriller built around storm chasing, extreme weather, and large-scale effects, which fit neatly with the park's original identity of putting guests inside the movies. The attraction debuted to guests on May 4, 1998, after its original opening was delayed following a real tornado outbreak in central Florida earlier that year. The entrance and queue were themed after the aftermath of a violent storm. Guests passed damaged scenery, film props, and production equipment. The first pre-show featured Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt. They discussed the making of Twister and the power of tornadoes. From there, guests moved into a second pre-show, set inside Aunt Meg's damaged house. Paxton and Hunt appeared again on television screens to explain more about tornadoes and storm chasing, helping to build anticipation for what was coming next. The main show arranged guests on tiered standing platforms, overlooking a recreation of the Galaxy Drive-In and Rocket hamburgers seen from the film. At first, the set was calm, with distant thunder and storm clouds gathering overhead. Then the weather began to turn. Sirens sounded, rain fell, lightning struck, and wind blasted across the room as the storm moved closer. A projected tornado appeared in the distance before the physical effects began to escalate. A large indoor funnel cloud formed as the wind intensified, using fans, smoke, and lighting to create the illusion of a twister tearing through the set. Windows shattered, signs ripped loose, with debris blown across the set. In one of the attraction's most memorable moments, a cow flew across the stage in a direct nod to the film. A truck slid into the gas pumps, sparks ignited the leaking fuel, and fire chased across the scene. As the storm reached its peak, the roof above the audience appeared to lift, before the platform suddenly dropped beneath their feet, giving the show one final scare. Over time, the attraction became less of a major draw. The film remained well known, but it did not have the same lasting pull as some of Universal's bigger franchises. The attraction also became more expensive to operate than its popularity could justify, and in later years, it sometimes operated seasonally. Twister Ride It Out closed permanently on November 2, 2015, after 17 years of operation. It was replaced in 2017 by Race Through New York, starring Jimmy Fallon. A few references to Twister survive in the new experience, including nods to Bill Paxton and the former attraction in the queue displays. T2 3D Battle Across Time opened at Universal Studios Florida on April 27, 1996, and quickly became one of the park's most impressive theatre-based attractions. It was designed as a major standalone experience based on Terminator 2 Judgment Day, one of the biggest action films of the early 1990s. The attraction reunited director James Cameron with the main cast from the film, including Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton, Edward Furlong, and Robert Patrick. Rather than simply retelling the movie, T2 3D acted as a mini-sequel, continuing the battle against Cyberdyne and Skynet. The experience began before guests entered the theatre. The queue was themed to Cyberdyne systems, with monitors presenting the company's latest technological achievements through the fictional Cyberdyne Interactive Network. Guests were given safety visors, the attraction's 3D glasses, before entering the pre-show area. The pre-show introduced the audience to the company's work. At first, the tone was corporate and polished, presenting Cyberdyne as a forward-thinking technology company. Then the feed was interrupted by Sarah and John Connor, warning guests that Cyberdyne was dangerous and that Skynet would eventually lead to a future war between humans and machines. Inside the auditorium, the show blended live action, 3D film, and practical effects. The audience watched as Cyberdyne unveiled its T-70 Terminators, large armed robotic figures. Before the demonstration could continue, Sarah and John Connor arrived on stage, attempting to shut Cyberdyne down. Their attack was interrupted by the arrival of a T-1000, before the T-800 Terminator made one of the show's most famous entrances. A live stunt performer burst through the screen on a Harley-Davidson motorcycle, creating the illusion that Arnold Schwarzenegger's Terminator had crossed directly from film into the theatre. From there, the attraction then moved fully into its 3D film sequence, as the Terminator and John travelled into the future war against Skynet. The film surrounded the audience across 3 large screens, expanding the action and filling the theatre. Guests followed the T-800 and John through a ruined battlefield, past hunter-killers, endoskeletons, and a Skynet facility, before reaching the central core. There they faced the T-1000, a huge liquid metal machine. The finale brought together projection, smoke, water, sound, and a sudden seat drop, as Skynet was destroyed. For its time, T2 3D was a major technical achievement. The attraction used 70mm 3D film, live performers, pyrotechnics, moving theatre effects, and carefully timed stage illusions to blur the line between screen and reality. Its film alone was reportedly one of the most expensive ever produced on a per-minute basis, and it was far more cinematic than a standard theme park show. It was also notable for bringing back the original creative talent and cast, giving it a stronger connection to the source material. The show proved popular enough to be exported beyond Florida. A version opened at Universal Studios Hollywood in 1999, followed by Universal Studios Japan in 2001. As time passed, the Terminator franchise no longer had the same cultural momentum it had enjoyed in the 1990s. The Hollywood version closed first, followed by the Florida version, which gave its final performance on October 8, 2017. In Orlando, the theatre was eventually transformed into the Bourne Stuntacular, which opened in 2020. The replacement was similar in many respects. Bourne was based on a more recent action franchise, but it kept the same broad idea of combining live performers with advanced projection and stage technology. Shrek 4D opened at Universal Studios Florida on June 12, 2003, arriving at a time when Universal was starting to refresh parts of the original Studios park, with newer, more recognisable film properties. The attraction was based on DreamWorks' Shrek, which had become a major animated hit after its release in 2001. The film's mix of fairy tale parody, pop culture jokes, and broad family appeal made it a strong fit for Universal, especially as the resort looked for attractions that could appeal to children while still entertaining adults. Shrek 4D replaced Alfred Hitchcock's The Art of Making Movies, closing the door on another attraction tied to Universal's original behind-the-scenes studio concept. Rather than retelling the first Shrek film, the attraction was created as a short sequel, set between Shrek and Shrek 2. The main cast returned, helping the attraction feel like a true continuation of the story. The experience began outside the theatre, where guests entered the Kingdom of Duloc. The queue included clips from the first film and fake in-world posters, setting up the same slightly warped fairy tale humour that had made the film so popular. Guests were handed their Ogre Vision glasses before entering the pre-show. The pre-show took place inside Lord Farquaad's dungeon. The story revealed that Lord Farquaad had returned as a ghost, after being eaten by a dragon at the end of the first film. Still obsessed with Fiona, he planned to capture her and make her his queen in the afterlife. Guests then entered the main theatre for a 4D film. The story followed Shrek and Donkey as they tried to reach the honeymoon hotel with Fiona, only for Thelonious to kidnap her on Farquaad's orders. From there, the film became a fast-moving chase through and above Far, Far Away. The theatre effects were a major part of the experience. The seats moved with the action, while water sprays, air blasts and leg ticklers were used to bring the film to life. The finale saw Shrek and Donkey rescue Fiona from Farquaad, with Dragon arriving just in time to save them from going over a waterfall. Farquaad was defeated once again, and Shrek and Fiona finally reached their honeymoon. Shrek 4D was never one of Universal's biggest headline attractions, but it was a fun family show. It captured the tone of the early Shrek films and gave Universal a modern animated property, at a time when the park was moving away from attractions about filmmaking and toward attractions based directly on popular franchises. By the 2020s, the Shrek franchise was no longer at the height of its popularity, and 4D theatre shows had become more common. Universal Studios Florida was also changing again, with the front of the park eventually being redeveloped around Illumination and the Minions. Shrek 4D closed permanently in Florida on January 10, 2022. Its building was later used for Illumination's VillainCon Minion Blast, which opened in 2023 as part of Minionland. The closure marked the end of a Shrek attraction at Universal Studios Florida, although the character would continue to have a presence at the resort through meet and greet experiences. Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit opened at Universal Studios Florida on August 19, 2009, giving the park a new headline attraction near the front gate. It was a Maurer X-Car coaster, and at 167 feet tall, it immediately became one of the most visible rides in the park. Universal officially announced the coaster in March of 2008. At the time, Islands of Adventure was preparing for the arrival of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, and the Studios Park needed a major thrill ride of its own to help balance attendance across the resort. Universal presented Rip Ride Rockit as a personalised music video experience. Each rider would choose a song before dispatch, hear it through speakers built into the headrest, and then have their ride captured by onboard cameras. Construction began in 2008, with the coaster threading through a small section of the park near Production Central in New York. Originally planned to open earlier in 2009, testing and technical issues delayed its debut until August. Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit used a rolling load station, with a moving platform alongside the slowly moving trains. Riders had to board, pull down the lap bar, and make their music selection within a short window. Originally, the ride offered a large selection of songs across different genres, with a hidden menu of additional tracks available through a code system, but in later years, the playlist had been reduced to a smaller selection. Once dispatched, the train entered the vertical chain lift. Riders climbed straight up the 167-foot tower, while their chosen song began playing. At the top, the train crested over and dropped down toward the park, reaching a top speed of 65 miles per hour. It was an intimidating opening, particularly because the vertical lift was still unusual for many riders. Adding to that, the coaster used only lap bar restraints, rather than the over-the-shoulder restraints that guests often expected on a ride of that scale. The first major element was the non-inverting loop. From the ground, it looked like a traditional vertical loop, but the track twisted so that riders remained upright as they travelled around the outside of the element. This meant that Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit had no inversions, despite the appearance of its layout. After the loop, the train hit the first of several brake runs, before dropping again and passing through a hole in a building facade. From there, it entered a large twisting helix. The second half of the ride continued with more turns, drops, brake runs, and near-miss moments, as the track worked its way above the pathways and around a garden area at the edge of the park. The layout was not especially smooth in later years, and the repeated brake runs became a common criticism, but the coaster still gave Universal Studios Florida a strong visual centerpiece. Over time, Rip Ride Rockit developed a mixed reputation. Many guests loved its vertical lift, music system, and unusual layout, while others found it rough, uncomfortable, or unreliable. It also had operational limitations, particularly in poor weather, and in 2010 it closed for an extended period, after concerns were raised about components on Maurer X-car trains. Even with criticisms, Hollywood Rip Ride Rockit remained a major part of Universal Studios Florida for 16 years. It was one of the resort's few large outdoor coasters, and became a defining part of the skyline. Its final day of operation was August 18, 2025, with demolition beginning soon after. Universal later confirmed that its replacement would be Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift, a new spinning roller coaster planned for the same area. Universal Studios Florida has changed dramatically since opening day. Many of the attractions that once defined the park have disappeared, replaced by newer franchises and new approaches to theme park storytelling. Some closures felt inevitable, while others still feel like major losses. But together, these vanished attractions show how the park has evolved, from a behind-the-scenes look at film and television production into the modern Universal Orlando resort we know today.